Let's be honest, trying to keep up with the world of handheld gaming right now feels almost impossible. And for me, the best way to describe what's going on at this current moment is to look at this as if it's just like a big open battlefield. On one side, you've got the clash of the titans for the mainstream throne. It feels like Nintendo, with their new launch of the Switch 2, have just sent like a huge shockwave through the entire industry. Even with the ridiculous pricing of the Switch 2, they've already shattered records at this point, which is ridiculous because there were so many people saying they weren't going to buy a Switch 2, and then it's just breaking records. And at this exact same time, we're getting competitive releases like the Legion Go S, the ROG Ally has been dropping a couple of different models. You've got the MSI Claw. The Steam Deck OLED is still a hot commodity at this point. And now here comes Xbox trying to drop in with their own version of a handheld. It's just like, it's insane. But then there's another fight that's going on, but this one is deep in the trenches. It's the frantic chaos of the retro handheld scene. This is like a weird little dogfight where dozens of companies now are fighting over just inches of ground, where everybody has to keep innovating, and there's so much output from these companies that the standard and the floor of quality continues to rise to the point where, you know, buying a cheaper handheld that's a retro device is a pretty good purchase. We've got both the high-end devices fighting for the market, as well as the lower-end devices with the retro handhelds also trying to get you to open up your wallet. So first I want to drop into the Switch 2 now that it's been out for about a week, and the success has been off the charts. So there's been a lot of noise, a lot of talks, a lot of discussion on how this is going to change and affect gaming handhelds in the future. And then I also want to take a deep dive into the retro handheld scene, take a look at some of the recent releases and how the standard for these small, affordable handhelds continues to rise. And we're doing all this just so we can get a little peek at how genuinely insane the future of gaming handhelds is. The Nintendo Switch 2 sold a staggering 3.5 million Switch 2 units in just its first 4 days on the market, which is crazy because so many people were complaining about the pricing of this. And, you know, I personally also think that the games are too expensive. I don't necessarily have a big problem with the $450 price tag. I would have preferred, obviously, for it to have been $400, but I mean, I can understand $450 with the games, though. That's where things get a little bit rough for me, but regardless, it's still selling so well. Now with the Switch 2, it feels like they're able to market to, you know, a group of gamers or a group of people who want to play Nintendo games, but also you've got a console that does pack a little bit of power to play some higher end AAA games. You've got Hogwarts Legacy, Elden Ring's on there. I'm sure we're going to get better ports of Witcher 3. You've got Cyberpunk. I mean, the options now to play higher end games with decent graphics, and it's on the same console that plays your Nintendo games, is there.
Is it supposed to happen?
And while there's definitely a lot of negatives we could harp on, the biggest thing that I'm hoping gets put in the spotlight is just the fact that the Switch 2 is backwards compatible. I truly think that is like one of, if not the biggest selling points for the Switch 2, the fact that you can play all of your old Switch games, which already is like a massive, massive library. The Switch 1 was essentially just like an indie game machine. It could play so many different games, and the third-party support for that console, unlike the Wii U, was off the charts. The Switch 2 success is also forcing this weird debate about what value really means. Like, we're pitting a lower-cost console with expensive games against expensive consoles with cheaper games. So we've essentially created this weird divide where you could dabble your feet into the little handheld gaming space with a cheaper Switch 2, but then the games are going to be more expensive. Or you could go for an extremely much more expensive PC handheld that's going to run you like $800, but then you've got the value of the Steam sales and probably getting items and games at a much cheaper price tag because of the fact that you're utilizing mostly Steam and potentially Windows, but you know, Windows on handhelds is kind of trash, so odds are most people are going to favor a device that does come with SteamOS. It's just a crazy battle where everybody's got an opinion, and there's basically a device, it feels like, for so many different people, which I think ultimately is the best part of this whole fiasco. And I absolutely agree with the sentiment that, you know, comparing the Switch 2 with the Steam Deck or PC handhelds isn't necessarily the most accurate thing. Like, they really do appeal to different markets and different groups of people. The Switch 2 is a very walled off experience, and it's a console at the end of the day. Meanwhile, something like the Steam Deck is a PC. Like, you're getting so much more options and capabilities with this device that you are going to have to tinker with, and they totally are trying to appeal to different types of people. But at the end of the day, I still feel like a consumer like myself, if I was trying to buy a handheld in this market nowadays, as different as the Switch and a Steam Deck are, I would still be comparing them and trying to understand which one I'd really want to buy. And now with the increased performance of the Switch 2, I think that puts it kind of in its own little spotlight and own lane, because now we've got the polish and the optimization of a console where these developers are specifically making these games for the Switch 2, and I get to play Nintendo games on top of that, which is stellar. The restrictions are pretty tight here as well, like with the digital downloads and digital key cards. I can't play on my original Switch if my other Switch already has the digital download, and I have to essentially connect to the internet to transfer over the digital ownership of that title to the new Switch, which is so dumb. Meanwhile, if I'm on the Steam Deck, I could just like go in airplane mode on the Steam Deck and still play a game while it's maybe running on my PC. I also think it's important to remember that having a bias towards a specific company is just really weird, because these are all for-profit companies, which is normal, but they're just trying to make more money off of you, so there's no point in having some type of brand loyalty when they're just essentially, they don't care about you. Most companies out there would watch you fall down like 3 flights of stairs into oncoming traffic, watch you get hit by a bus, and then as you're on the floor begging for help, they would just ask you if you want to buy their newest handheld. I think Nintendo's internal goal is like to sell 15 million consoles by the end of March in 2026. And to do that, they'll have to navigate like 2 major challenges, because you first got the momentum slowdown once the hardcore fans have all bought in. Then how do you essentially market to the casual audience to buy $80 games, which is absurd. And while Nintendo continue to wage this calculated battle for like the mainstream audience, we can look to the shadow that they're casting, and in that same shadow you're going to see the retro handheld scene just battling it out at the smallest level. And here in the retro handheld scene, things are getting kind of boring, but in a way very eventful at the same time. Allow me to explain what I mean by that, and I'm gonna use the latest release from Anbernic, the RG35XX Pro, to kind of paint this picture of what we're witnessing. So this is the newest model and the newest drop from Anbernic, and it costs only a whopping $50. This is like a budget price point, entry point for anybody new in the retro handheld scene. Under the hood, it's got an H700 chipset, which plays essentially all of your retro games up to and including PS1, a little bit of N64, and some Dreamcast in there. It's also got a 3.5-inch 480p screen, which does look pretty solid with the contrast and the saturation. It's got HDMI out, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and like a solid 6 to 7 hours of battery life, depending on what game you're actually pushing. The front-facing buttons and the D-pad have always been kind of up in the air with the cheaper end devices, but as of late, I feel like a lot of these companies have really been getting solid buttons down and consistently putting out devices that feel great in the hands. And it's got 2 thumbsticks on the bottom, which is, I guess, what makes it the Pro model. So now you've got the option of just dual analog sticks for your games, which, you know, I'm not the craziest fan of it, but for some people, they like it. And overall, it's just got such a really good feel in the hands. It's got a nice weight. The buttons and layout are tried and true. And it's just a proven format that just simply works and gives someone an incredible retro gaming experience, all packed into a small size that could fit in your pocket. The speakers are a little bit weak, and the screen isn't necessarily the best one that I've seen on the more affordable side for retro handhelds, but it does get the job done, and it still feels pretty solid, especially if you compare it to older devices. And lastly, you do still have some stupid charging issues, and you have to use the right charging brick whenever you're looking to get this thing back to full power, but those are basically small little gripes that I have with this thing, because at the end of the day, we have to remember this is still relatively affordable. $50 is still a lot of money and a good chunk of change, but I do think that the value speaks for itself. It's literally just so good and so solid that a lot of people, including myself, would essentially just consider a device like this to be boring. To any enthusiast or a person who already owns a retro handheld from like the past year or two, this is not the most exciting thing, and it's clearly just another carbon copy of what we've already seen. This now, in my opinion, kind of solidifies where we're at and the fact that we have reached a plateau in the retro handheld scene. The market is so saturated with great devices at this point that I feel like the only thing to get a lot of consumers like myself who own handhelds already to buy another device would be some type of innovation or something to separate their device from the sea of clones that we've already seen like this. And we have already started to see the effects of the plateau that I'm talking about, because the future is starting to get kind of crazy. The RG Slide is a device that has been announced, and this thing looks insane. This is like some weird slider smartphone from like 2007, 2008 that my brother was using whenever he was in high school, and honestly, I am all here for it. These are the type of devices that are required now to get us to turn our heads in the retro handheld scene, and we're just going to be looking at a sea, I'm hoping, of innovation and new, different looking devices. Retroid are also starting to get a little bit quirky here, and they're releasing a second little screen device that can attach and plug into your Retroid Pocket 5, and then now everybody's saying, and you know, it does obviously look like this would be great for DS and 3DS emulation, because we've for once gotten two screens on a retro handheld device. And don't even talk about that stupid iNeo device. That thing is so expensive for no reason. I think they also just announced like another version, and it's probably gonna be like $1,000. Why are these so expensive? Who's buying it? What are they doing? This is insane. I'm not even gonna count this. It doesn't count. As a huge fan of the DS, I'm actually so pumped for this little screen add-on for the Retroid Pocket 5, but I'm also insanely sad because if you watched my previous review of the Flip 2, I said that I would be selling my Retroid Pocket 5, the horizontal version, and keeping the Flip 2. I will be keeping the Flip 2 and then selling the RP5 on eBay. And that's exactly what I did. So now I sold the one device that would have given me actual proper DS emulation, and I'm not about to just buy a whole new Retroid Pocket 5, so I can go ahead and buy another screen add-on as well. So there is an affordable device, the 040 from I believe Magic X, that's releasing, and that has like this big vertical screen, which a lot of people are saying is going to be good for DS emulation because you can split it into two obvious, you know, screens for the DS, and it would also be good for arcade shooters too, and that one should hopefully be cheaper. And that's essentially the big picture here I'm trying to argue, is that the baseline of quality, for example with the RG35XX Pro, has gotten so good. Like, this is a fantastic device, but in order for us to all turn our heads, we are looking at something that's a little bit more unique, a little bit more interesting, and that's exactly what's coming and what's actually on the way. So as we look across the landscape for 2025, the picture becomes incredibly clear. The two big conflicts for our pockets are being fought on completely different terms. In the mainstream, Nintendo has basically created this kingdom of the Switch 2. They're leveraging their huge army of players and just trying to create as much value while also being able to still charge them an arm and a leg for their games, all while competing with like the SteamOS Alliance, who's trying to fight back with not just more power than the Switch 2, but also with long-term value and maybe a bigger or more open library. And then on the other side, we've got the conflict for the retro handhelds, who are not really in a marathon similar to maybe the higher end devices, but are instead looking at a little window, a little sprint, where you have to create this device that can hopefully provide enough value to a lot of people within 3 to 6 months before you're forced to drop and innovate and make another device. And that's why the future is looking great, and I just wanted to share my excitement for basically what's to come. But that's the end of the video. Thank you so much for watching. Thanks for being here. I have another Switch 2 like full review video that's dropping in hopefully a couple of days, so stay tuned for that, and just thank you for all of the support. The channel's been growing at just a beautiful rate. I'm really blessed that many of you want to even listen to me talk and want to be here for the channel. So seriously, thank you so much, and I hope I see you in the next video.
Rep my city from the south, now I'm on the west coast trying to sway new crowds. I was uptown, but I slid to the east. If I go north side, still we all gon' feast. I'm well versed in my checks, no fees, won't talk.